All right. So good morning, Chevra. I apologize for the little bit of the raspy voice, but as we said, better to get started raspy than not to get started at all. And going into the new year, I figured it was a great opportunity to close off 5784 with an idea, especially because we're going into a big season. Um, Listen, on a personal level, I think I speak personally on everybody. Obviously this Rosh Hashanah is very different, and we're not going to go in there. It's different and it's not different. It's different because for us personally, it's extremely different. I don't think any of the thoughts that we have on our mind this year are thoughts that we had anywhere close to our mind last year or possibly ever. It's not different because the same Rosh Hashanah that you and I are about to engage in is the same one that they engaged in 1943, let alone 46 after it was over. It's the same one they engaged in throughout the Crusader period, throughout the Inquisition period, throughout the Destruction period. It's not that, oh, Rosh Hashanah is usually just a time where everything works out well. And then you go through the motions again of being, where did you get your honey cake? Did you get it at Grzinski's or Hermes? And yeah, we'll try to do a little bit better. The truth is that Rosh Hashanah has always been extremely real. And we just feel it in different ways at different times. So many of the talks that I've been giving over the course of the last little while have been like the most important two words to say, or the biggest key to a successful. And obviously, we know that there's no such thing as the most important and the biggest key. There's one could argue almost any angle of value, has intrinsic value more than any other. That's why debate clubs are so popular. But I'd like to share with you one that I think that sometimes we don't take enough advantage of, and especially this year. I was giving a class downtown, Bay Street Lunch and Learn, and we were talking about what's changed since last year. And where we arrived at the end of the day was the biggest thing that changed at the end of the year is actually not the world, but it's possibly us. And if you think about that, it's not a small piece, meaning who we are today, I think, is, or at least should be, radically different than how we were and who we were a year ago at this time, and not in small part because of what we've gone through this year. And I think that nugget of the fact that we are different, that we've definitely taken a shift and a change for whatever reason that might be. And in this instance, I think we'd all agree it wasn't something that was brought on by a good motivation. But nonetheless, it's proven to us that each and every one of us weren't as static and set and fixed in our ways as we might have thought that's who we are and that's it. And therefore, I want to share with us this morning just one small piece of Rambam, Maimonides. Maimonides, in his magnum opus called the Mishnah Torah, which goes through every single aspect of Jewish law, has a chapter on tshuva. It's actually got 10 chapters to this section. And he goes through, in fact, some people have the custom, there's 10 days of Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur, 10 days all included. Some people go through one chapter each of those days because it really lays down the framework in so many ways of what is teshuva, which I guess we translate as repentance, but all it really means, like the word lashuv means to return, right? We're just returning. We're not changing. We're returning back to who we are and who we could be, right? And it goes through the mechanics of what it is and how it is and what a person has to do and why we do it and so on and so forth. But right in the middle, smack in the middle, in the fifth chapter, he starts with the following words, which I think that could easily be passed over, but in light of our topic of what's important for the most successful year, without this piece, I don't think it's possible for it to have any value whatsoever. So he says as follows. I'll read it in Hebrew and I'll translate it, obviously. Rishus l'chol adam nesuna, that there is permission or ability given to each and every person, imratza lahatos atzmo l'derech tova, if they want to turn themselves to a good path, v'lios tzaddik, and to become a righteous person, harishus biyado, you have that opportunity. V'imratza lahatos atzmo, and if you want to turn yourself l'derech ra, towards a negative way of being, v'lios rasha, and to be an evil person, harishus biyado, the choice is in your hand. Meaning, it sounds very simple what the Rambam's saying, but the reality is the only way that we can go ahead and make a change is if we actually believe that we have the ability to choose to make a change. And I think that in that subtle point, so many people actually don't really embrace the power of the ability to make a change. They tell a story, or more of a joke, of a Dalai Lama who was sitting there and getting a hot dog down in, at Wall Street, and he gives the guy $2, and it's a 75-cent hot dog. Gives him the hot dog bag, and he waits for the change. He says, "Hey, buddy, where's my change?" He says, "Come on, the change comes from within. Comes from within." right? There's an idea that really at the end of the day, one's change can't be motivated by external motivations. That can get a person awakened to the fact that change is necessary, or that change is, I wouldn't even call it necessary, is positive, is good. There's something great about that. Anyone who feels that they're the same person that they were back then now, I would argue probably doesn't feel as good as somebody who sat there and said, you know what, this has changed so much about who I am and what I do and what my outlook is and what my identity means and how I'm going to lean into it rather than possibly slowly drift away from that. All of that seems that it was external forces which might have motivated that. But at the end of the day, the choice comes down to the fact that we have the choice to do whichever we want. Means this second, right? If we decided I wanted to do A, nothing's holding me back from being that person. And if I decided I wanted to drop doing B, nothing would hold me back. Sustainability is another question, obviously, right? Whether or not we plan for sustainable change in the right way, that's a whole different discussion. But one thing I know for sure, if I decided right now I wanted to, I don't know, stand up and start saying a bracha whenever I drank a cup of water and say "Shakol Ni'ebed V'ro," be like, I can't do that. Oh, yeah, I mean you can. I'll send you the blessing. It's not so difficult, and that's it, right? Or if a person just decided, you know what, from now on I'm not doing Shabbos anymore. Technically, a person could just make that choice. It's not impossible, but we have that power of choice either which way. Now, sometimes we're actively involved in our choices, so we know what it is we want and we do it. And other times we passively make choices without sort of being aware of them, which usually are the ones that drift us further away. Very often a person doesn't say, I don't want to be as much as I am right now. Just over time, the choices that they make slowly take them in that direction. And I think in many ways, Rosh Hashanah is this recalibration. When we say Hayom Harat Olam, today the world is created, as we know, our sages teach us, it's not that the world was created, it was that Adam and Eve were created on this day. Right? This is the day that the human being, the human project was created. And the nature of the human project is we have the ability to choose. And if we want to turn to one path, we can, and turn to the other. I want to mention two other small points within the Rambam, which are very subtle, but people who study the Maimonides, who study Rambam, know that each word that he chooses is always so important. He says if a person chooses, he doesn't say to do good. He says lahatos atzmo, to turn himself towards the good path. So imagine a person is standing and he sees these two, right? There's the fork in the road, proverbial fork in the road. And he gets there and deciding which way to go. The first step in terms of which way to go is which direction do you turn yourself? Right? There's so much power in just the turn to go to the right direction, right? If I happen to be over here and I make a little shift this way, right? That seems like what's the big deal? But what that means is within a matter of time, right? It's going to end up all the way on the other corner of this screen. That's totally different than if I would have just made a little shift this way, and that little shift way would have gone totally in the opposite direction. Now, I might think I can't make it all the way there. That's too far. Or no, I'm never going to end up over there. That's not who I am. But the truth is, you're right, that is too far, and that's not who you are. But right now, we have the power to turn in the direction. And just that small decision to make a small modification in the direction, the Rambam says if I make that turn, I will end up like that person. Right? It's not a, it's if I take a left, I know which way I'm going to get out to which main street. And if I take a right, I know which main street it's going to be. The turn itself doesn't get me there, but it gets me on the road that's going to eventually get me there. And I don't have to worry about how am I going to get to the long-term end goal. I just have to worry about what small modification can I make to get there. And then the Rambam continues, Maimonides continues, and I'll share this part outside. He says that's why the Torah says that here's the person who is ladas tov v'ra, that human beings, as we know in the beginning story, we're the people who know good and bad. Klomar, that is to say, min zeh shel adam, this species of mankind, haya yachid ba'olam. It is unique in the entire world. The Ein Min Sheni Domalo. There's no second creation that's similar to it in this area that has an understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Everything else, right? The tea that I'm drinking, the apple that I ate, everything else is just a static thing. And it might move based on its preference of what it wants. If a lion's hungry, it will eat, not because it wants to brutalize somebody or not brutalize somebody. It's just part of its creation. Am I hungry? Am I not hungry? If I am, I eat. If I'm not, I don't. Human beings make a choice. Should I eat now? Does that belong to me? Should I say a blessing? Who else is going to want to eat? Right? Everything has this ability to be able to parse through what is right and what is wrong. But it all starts back to the beginning as we enter into Rosh Hashanah. And again, even though this year is not different in the sense that throughout history, we've faced every up and every down and gone through our Rosh Hashanah. But for us, it is in the sense of us being able to realize, you know what? A lot's changed. But the most important area in life that has to change is me through that. I can't control the global geopolitical world. Yes, there are people that do tremendous things, and we all have to do our efforts, and whether it be writing and davening, that's true. But the one thing, the only thing, and the only person that has the ability to make the change on the most important area in my life is me, and that is on me. And therefore, the Rambam says one has to remember this power of choice at all time. Just one more thought, we'll close. Obviously, if there's any questions, feel free. Right? When it comes to this idea of tshuva, it's so interesting to note that when we enter into Rosh Hashanah is the time where we don't do any of this stuff, which we're familiar with, where we, bang our chests. That happens way down the road on Yom Kippur, 10 days later, right? So we start our new year not with addressing the issues that we have. We start the new year without any of that. In fact, we have customs like you don't eat certain things because they remind us of chet. So it says you don't eat an egos. Why not? That kind of nut, because the numerical value is the numerical value of chet, of sin. And we don't want to talk about sin on Rosh Hashanah. What does that mean? It's a new year. So if we're talking about a new year, how are we going to say I'm going to move forward? We have to know what are the issues that we have, right? So why do we wait 10 days later, excuse me, to go ahead and do that? But I think it lays exactly into the point that we're saying. The first point isn't to figure out what are all the mistakes that I made. The first point is to figure out who do I want to become? What kind of change do I want to be in the essence of the person? The Rambam doesn't talk about start working on this or that. He says, do you want to go down a path of being better than you were? Or are you on the path of going down the path of slowly attrition towards not as great a version of the version that you are, and definitely not as great as a version that you could be? But regardless of who we are, what stage we are in life, whatever it is that we're each facing, our choice towards those paths might be different because we're all unique individuals with a unique landscape. We're all on our own, course in life. But the fact that we're all facing at any moment these two divergent paths, one in one direction towards tzaddik, righteousness, and being the best version of ourselves, and one, God forbid, the other, that we have to realize is only dependent on us. And that we can't sit there and say, but why didn't I? It's irrelevant. Once we embrace that, the power of our own abilities to make choices and to become the person that we want to be, ultimately, that is the start of what the new year is. Otherwise, it's just going through the motions, seeing the same sort of set of, shall we call them, New Year's resolutions on a piece of paper, not even rethinking whether those resolutions are the right ones. I think I would argue that this year, what we might have had on those pieces of paper would be very different than what they might be this year. There's a great awakening inside of each and every person, and it would be a shame to unfortunately let such a year like this go, which we didn't obviously ask for, and we daven that it ends soon. But the fact that it happened means it should have made a profound impact on how we're thinking, on what we're doing, and that should be the greatest fuel that we have to take this Rambam, this piece of the Maimonides, and say, great, what kinds of choices do I want to make as I get ready for the new year? I know in the Ashkenaz tradition, we're starting to say slichot, which are special prayers as lead up. We always get into the mood. There's spring training when it comes to any important game. So too with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You don't just show up the morning of and feel like you're in the zone. You've got to warm up. You've got to start thinking about it beforehand. So when those words and the shofar blows, we're in a space where we receive it in a way like we did it before. So Chevra, going to wish everyone a great last couple of days of 5784. May it be, as we say in one of our tefillos, Tichlas Shana V'Kil Lasah, to be the end of a year with all its curses, and it should be the beginning of a chapter of, just as we could not have imagined a worse year than we just had, we have to believe and know that it's true that we also cannot imagine of the best year that's capable to happen on the other side of the fence as well. So we should merit to see that. It's great to see everyone again, and wishing you guys a Shana Tova. All right.